Monumental stone arcs stride across the landscape of southern France. How did an ancient civilization, completely without modern technology, construct these colossal waterways that supplied fresh water for millions of people? By the end of this journey, you will understand the hidden genius that allowed an empire to conquer its most fundamental need. We will uncover why the iconic arches are a small piece of a much larger mystery and reveal the secret ingredient in their concrete that still puzzles scientists today. What forgotten lessons from these silent stone giants are we only just beginning to remember? Rome was a city bursting at its seams, a metropolis swelling with over 1 million inhabitants. This unprecedented urban density created a desperate problem, a thirst that the muddy, polluted waters of the Tiber River and the few local springs could never hope to quench. The very survival and grandeur of the empire's heart depended on a solution. This was not merely a quest for drinking water, it was about sustaining an entire civilization's identity. The Roman way of life was built around water. Grand public bathhouses known as thermae were not just for washing, they were sprawling social hubs, centers of business, gossip, and relaxation, requiring staggering volumes of fresh flow. The city's spectacular fountains were not mere decorations, they were powerful symbols of imperial abundance and technological mastery, constantly flowing to demonstrate Rome's command over nature. Even the practicalities of daily life demanded immense resources, from the complex public latrines that served the masses to the bustling industrial workshops. In the noisy, smelly fulleries, water was essential for processing and cleaning woolen cloth, while powerful aqueduct-driven water wheels turned millstones to grind grain into flour for the city's daily bread. The aqueduct was not a luxury, it was the vital artery that pumped life into the empire, making every monumental arch a direct response to the very real and pressing thirst of a world capital. Those iconic stone arches are a brilliant piece of architectural theater, but they tell only a tiny fraction of the story. The Romans were not just master builders, they were master engineers of concealment. For every mile of aqueduct carried proudly on arches across a valley, 10 more miles of its journey were completely invisible, hidden deep within the earth. This was the true backbone of the system, a sprawling subterranean network of tunnels and covered trenches. Why bury the very lifeline you worked so hard to create? The reasons reveal a profound practical intelligence. First, by running the channel underground, the Romans protected their precious water from the relentless sun, drastically reducing loss through evaporation. Second, and perhaps more critically, this sealed stone conduit acted like a massive, continuous filter, shielding the water from dust, debris, and contamination that would have easily polluted an open channel. And in a world of rival powers and potential conflicts, a buried water supply was a secure water supply, safe from enemy tampering or deliberate poisoning. The grand arcades were necessary solutions for dramatic landscape features, but the silent, hidden tunnels were the true strategic marvel, a testament to an empire that understood the power of working with the land, not just conquering it from above. But concealing the aqueduct's path was only half the battle. The first and most critical challenge was finding that path at all. Before a single stone could be laid, the Roman surveyor, the agrimensor, had to solve an immense puzzle laid across the landscape. His task was to trace a line of near-perfect, gentle descent for dozens, sometimes hundreds of miles, from a distant spring to the heart of a thirsty city. He had to make water flow as if it were walking an impossibly long, slow staircase down a mountain, and he had to map every single step without ever being able to see the entire route. To accomplish this, he relied on two deceptively simple tools. The first was the chorobates, a wooden bench as long as a man is tall, with a carefully carved groove running along its top. This groove was filled with water, creating a flawless level. By sighting along the water's surface, the surveyor could determine if the ground beneath his feet was perfectly flat. If the wind rippled the water, he could use plumb lines hanging from the frame for the same purpose. The second tool was the groma, a clever device for sighting right angles. It looked like a cross mounted on a pole with a plumb bob hanging from the end of each arm. By lining up the strings of opposite plumb bobs, the surveyor could create perfectly straight lines and, by turning the device, map out precise 90-degree angles, laying out the aqueduct's course across the countryside. The real genius, however, was not in the tools themselves but in their relentless application. The surveyor and his team would set up the chorobates, take a measurement, then move the entire setup forward and measure again. Step by painstaking step, they would map the elevation of the land, searching for that crucial, continuous downhill grade of just a few feet per mile. It was a monumental feat of endurance and precision, a slow dance of observation and calculation that could take years, all to answer one simple, vital question. Where does the water want to go? This foundational work, this invisible line drawn across the earth, was what made every magnificent stone arch and every hidden tunnel possible. Yet even the most perfectly mapped route would be useless without the right water to fill it. The Romans were not just engineers of flow, they were connoisseurs of water itself. They held a deep, almost instinctual belief that the best water came not from muddy rivers, but from the cold, dark heart of the mountains. They sought out springs bubbling up from deep within the rock, water filtered through layers of stone and earth, prized for its purity, its cool temperature, and its refreshing taste. Finding this perfect source was only the beginning. The Romans then performed what they called a captatio, a word that means a capturing or a gathering. This was the delicate art of coaxing the water from the earth without disturbing its quality. They did not simply stick a pipe into the spring. Instead, they constructed elaborate spring houses right over the source, small, vaulted chambers of stone and concrete that protected the water's exit point from the elements. Inside, they built a series of collection basins. The first basin would allow the water to well up naturally, letting any heavy sand or sediment sink to the bottom before the clearer water gently overflowed into a second, cleaner basin. Think of it as a quiet, natural pre-filtering stage, a moment of calm for the water before it began its long journey. This careful, almost reverent process at the source was the most critical quality control step in the entire system. While the Romans did sometimes tap into lakes or rivers, these were considered secondary sources, often used for irrigation or industrial purposes, precisely because the water was more likely to be turbid or warm. For the aqueducts that fed the great cities, the goal was always that pristine mountain spring, captured with a gentle hand, setting the stage for everything that would follow. That gentle coaxing of water from its source was only the prelude to a far grander feat of persuasion. Once captured, the water had to be convinced to travel. The entire Roman aqueduct system operated on a single, silent, and invisible engine, gravity. But this was not the dramatic pull of a waterfall. It was a force applied with almost impossible subtlety. The Romans engineered a slope so shallow it defies belief, a gradient often as slight as 1 part in 200. Picture this as a journey where the water drops only a single foot over a distance of 200 feet. On an even gentler route, a 1 in 500 slope, the descent would be a mere inch for every 100 feet traveled. Maintaining this precise, whisper-thin decline over dozens of miles was the system's central, monumental challenge. Why such an excruciatingly slow descent? The Romans were masters of flow dynamics, though they would not have used the term. A steeper slope would have sent the water rushing forward with violent force, quickly scouring and eroding the delicate lime and ceramic lining of the channel. It would have arrived in the city in a turbulent, muddy torrent. Conversely, a slope that was too level would have allowed the water to stagnate, letting sediment settle and turning the aqueduct into a sluggish, polluted swamp. That perfect minimal gradient was the golden mean. It created just enough energy to keep the water moving, a steady, gentle, and perfectly clear stream that was both predictable and controllable. Achieving this over rolling hills and through solid rock was not a single act of construction, but a continuous act of precision, a testament to an empire that learned to negotiate with the landscape itself. But that gentle slope, so carefully mapped, had to become a physical reality. The true workhorse of the Roman aqueduct was not the soaring arcade, but the silent, dark channel buried beneath the earth. This was the Specus, the very vein through which the water flowed. Imagine a man-made stone river, a perfectly engineered gutter built for a single, vital purpose. Its walls were lined with smooth, watertight concrete, a special mix of lime, sand, and crushed terracotta. The floor of this channel was paved with flat stones or more concrete, all sloped with that impossibly precise gradient. And to protect this precious stream from leaves, animals, and the sun, the Romans capped it with large, flat stone slabs, creating a covered, subterranean conduit. This was the hidden highway, stretching for mile after unglamorous mile. When the surveyor's line met an immovable obstacle like a mountain, the Romans did not go around. They went straight through. Tunneling through solid rock was a feat of almost unimaginable effort. Without dynamite, they relied on a brutal, methodical process. In a technique called fire setting, workers would build intense fires directly against the rock face. Once the stone was superheated, they would douse it with cold water or vinegar, causing it to fracture and weaken. Then, teams of men wielding iron picks and hammers would attack the weakened stone, chipping away a few precious inches at a time. The air in these narrow tunnels would have been thick with acrid smoke and rock dust, a hellish environment of heat and noise. To manage these immense projects, they used a clever system of vertical shafts known as lumina. These were not just for removing rubble, they were vital for air. As teams dug the main tunnel from both ends, other crews would sink these shafts from the surface straight down to the planned tunnel level. This created multiple work faces, allowing many teams to attack the mountain simultaneously. It also provided crucial ventilation, bringing fresh air down into the stifling depths. Later, these same shafts served as maintenance access points, letting inspectors descend to clear blockages or make repairs. Each of these lumina represents a mountain of labor, a testament to the sheer human force an empire could muster to convince a mountain to step aside. Yet even the deepest tunnel had to eventually meet open air. When the surveyor's unwavering line encountered a wide, shallow valley, the Romans responded with their most iconic invention, the arcade. These graceful processions of stone arches are not mere monuments. They are functional extensions of the hidden channel, lifting the Specus high into the air to maintain that crucial, gentle gradient across a depression in the land. By carrying the water channel on this elevated bridge, the engineers ensured the flow never lost its momentum, never had to climb back uphill. The arcade was a brilliant, logical solution, a way to let the water walk straight across a void on a perfectly level path, all while creating a breathtaking landmark that announced Roman power and ingenuity for all to see. But not every valley was shallow and wide. Some were deep, precipitous gorges where building a towering arcade hundreds of feet high would have been impossibly expensive and structurally unsound. For these profound challenges, the Romans deployed their most advanced and daring technology, the inverted siphon. This was a system that defied intuition. Instead of carrying the water over the valley, they sent it rushing down one side and catapulting back up the other. The aqueduct channel would end at a large sealed tank on the valley's edge. From this tank, multiple heavy lead pipes, sometimes housed in a protective stone conduit, would plunge straight down the mountainside. The immense weight of the water in the descending pipes created tremendous pressure, forcing the flow not just down but back up the opposite slope to a receiving tank placed at a slightly lower elevation. It was a controlled, violent explosion of hydraulic force, a testament to a sophisticated understanding of pressure that seems to belong to a much later age. The entire system was a masterclass in choosing the right tool for the terrain, a seamless blend of elegant simplicity and audacious complexity, all in the silent, single-minded pursuit of an unbroken flow. This entire hydraulic symphony, from the gentle slope to the daring siphon, depended on a single, revolutionary material. The Romans possessed a kind of superpower, a secret recipe for a building substance that defied the ages. They called it opus cementitium, and we know it as Roman concrete. While we might think of concrete as a dull, grey slab, theirs was something else entirely. It was an alchemical marvel, a stone that could be poured, that set underwater, and that grew stronger with each passing century. The magic was not in the lime or the water, but in a special ingredient they mixed in, a volcanic ash they called pulvis puteolinus, named for the deposits near the Bay of Naples. Today we call it pozzolana. This fine, reddish-grey powder was the true heart of their concrete. When combined with lime and water, a remarkable chemical reaction occurred. The mixture would not simply dry out like modern cement. Instead, it would cure into an incredibly dense, interlocking crystal structure. This is what made it hydraulic, meaning it could set and harden even when completely submerged. Think of the implications for an aqueduct system. They could line their subterranean channels with this concrete, creating a perfect, watertight seal that the damp earth could not penetrate. They could build the massive foundations for their arcades directly in rivers and their harbor walls right in the crashing waves of the sea. The concrete did not just resist water, it thrived in it. And in a twist that seems to defy all logic, Roman concrete actually improved with time. While our modern concrete can crack and crumble after a few decades, exposure to seawater or mineral-rich groundwater slowly continues the chemical reaction within the Roman mix. Over centuries, new, strengthening minerals grow within the matrix, effectively healing tiny cracks and making the material more resilient. The aqueducts we see today are not just ruins, they are active demonstrations of this ongoing chemical process. That silent, hidden channel, that specus, was not just a ditch in the ground. It was a living, breathing organ, lined with a material that was, in its own slow way, still alive. How many modern structures can we say will be stronger in 2,000 years than they are today? Step inside this hidden stone river, and you would find an environment meticulously crafted for a single purpose, the flawless delivery of water. The channel itself, the specus, was typically a tall, narrow rectangle or a rounded U shape, just wide enough for a maintenance worker to crouch inside. Its walls and floor were not bare stone. They were coated in a remarkable rosy pink plaster the Romans called opus signinum. This was no ordinary mortar. It was a specialized, waterproof mix of lime and incredibly fine, crushed terracotta, the broken shards of countless pots and tiles. When this mixture cured, it created a glassy, smooth, almost impermeable surface that minimized friction and prevented the water from seeping into the surrounding earth. This lining was the aqueduct's first line of defense, ensuring that every possible drop reached its destination. But even the purest spring water could pick up silt and sand along its long journey. The Romans understood this, and so they built quiet resting places into the very heart of the flow. At regular intervals along the subterranean route, they constructed small, rectangular chambers known as piscinae or settling basins. These were cleverly designed expansions of the channel. As the water entered this wider, calmer space, its speed would drop dramatically. Suddenly unable to carry its burden, the water would release the suspended grit and sediment, which would gently settle to the bottom of the basin. The clearer water would then flow out through an outlet set slightly higher on the opposite wall, continuing its journey purified once more. Think of these basins as the aqueduct's internal filtration system, a series of waste stations where the water could catch its breath and leave its baggage behind. And to ensure this entire hidden world never fell into disrepair, the Romans integrated a simple yet brilliant feature: access points. These were the manholes of the ancient world, often marked at the surface only by a simple stone slab. Through these openings, specialized crews known as aquarii could descend into the dim channel to scrub the walls, dredge out the settled mud from the piscine, and clear any blockages. This was not a system built and forgotten. It was a living piece of infrastructure maintained with the same meticulous care with which it was first designed. The Specus was far more than a ditch. It was a self-cleaning, self-regulating, and actively maintained superhighway, a testament to an engineering philosophy that thought of everything even 2,000 years ago. So the water finally arrives at the city walls, its long journey almost complete. But here, at the very edge of urban life, it faced its most critical transition. The main aqueduct channel did not simply pour into the city. It emptied into a specialized, heavily fortified building known as the Castellum Aquae, the water castle. This was the grand central station of the entire Roman water supply, a place of both purification and profound decision. Inside this circular or polygonal chamber, the water from the aqueduct would first spill into a large, shallow basin. This served as a final, massive settling tank. After traveling dozens of miles, any last traces of sediment, any final particles that had evaded the earlier piscine, would sink peacefully to the bottom of this pool. The water that flowed out from here was in its most pristine state, ready for its final task. But the true genius of the Castellum was not in cleaning the water, but in dividing it. Set into the walls of the chamber, just above the floor, was a carefully arranged series of outlet holes. From each of these openings, a heavy lead pipe, a fistula, would carry the water away on a new path. This was the moment of distribution, a meticulously planned division of a precious resource. One pipe might be destined for the city's public fountains, ensuring every citizen, no matter their wealth, had access to fresh water. Another, larger pipe would feed the immense demands of the public bathhouses, those sprawling centers of Roman social life. A third might be channeled toward the industrial districts, powering mills and fulleries, while a fourth, often the most pressurized, would climb to the homes of the wealthy and the palaces of the emperor. The size of each outlet hole and its corresponding pipe was a deliberate act of civic engineering, a physical representation of a water budget. It was here, in the quiet dimness of the Castellum, that the single, unified flow of the aqueduct was transformed into the complex, life-giving network that truly sustained the city. This was the final, brilliant act of control before the water disappeared into the bustling streets. This vast network of hidden channels and soaring arches culminated in one of the most complex water grids the ancient world would ever see. By the close of the 1st century, the city of Rome was not sustained by a single aqueduct, but by 11. Each of these great waterways was a monumental project in its own right, a separate artery tapping distant mountain springs and converging on the capital from every direction. The first of these giants was the Aqua Appia, a modest but revolutionary underground channel begun in 312 BC. It was a secretive project born in a time of war, its path entirely hidden to protect it from enemies. Centuries later, the Aqua Marcia became legendary, famed for the frigid purity and exquisite taste of its water, so prized that it was piped directly into the homes of the wealthy. Then there was the Aqua Claudia, a true titan of engineering, striding into the city on massive, multi-tiered arcades that still stand today. If you could look down on ancient Rome from above, you would see these 11 lines snaking across the landscape, not as a single thread, but as a sprawling, interconnected web. They approached from the east, the north, and the south, their courses sometimes running parallel, sometimes crossing over one another. This was not just abundance, it was strategic redundancy. If one aqueduct needed repair after a storm or was damaged in a conflict, the others could continue to supply the city, preventing a total collapse of the water supply. This complex grid transformed Rome from a city with water into a city built upon water, a metropolis where the flow of life itself was guaranteed by not one, but 11 stone giants, each with its own name, its own history, and its own vital role to play. This constant, clean flow was never guaranteed. It was earned daily by an army of unseen workers who patrolled the dark, damp channels, the true lifeblood of the system. These were the aquarii, the watermen. They were teams of skilled state laborers and public slaves, funded by the imperial treasury to perform the gritty, essential work that kept the water running. Their world was one of dim light and echoing silence, far from the sun-drenched arcades. Their primary task was a relentless battle against accumulation. As water traveled for miles, it would slowly deposit a hard, crusty mineral called sinter, a form of calcium carbonate. This was not dirt, but a stony shell that would gradually build up on the channel walls, relentlessly narrowing the passage like plaque hardening in an artery. The aquarii would spend back-breaking hours with iron picks and chisels, breaking this concrete-like deposit away from the specus lining, shoveling the heavy fragments into baskets to be hauled to the surface. They also had to regularly dredge the settling basins, the piscinae, scooping out the thick mud and silt that had been patiently collected there. A single storm upstream could wash a surge of debris into the system, creating a sudden blockage that demanded an immediate, muddy response. Their work was a cycle of prevention and emergency, a constant effort to outpace the natural world's attempt to reclaim its water. These men were the system's immune system, its constant, quiet repair crew, ensuring that the engineering marvel above ground never failed due to neglect below. The aqueducts did not maintain themselves. They were a living network, and these were the hands that kept its heart beating. For all its engineering brilliance, the aqueduct system would have been a chaotic mess without the sharp mind of a single, determined administrator. In 97 AD, the Emperor Nerva appointed a man named Sextus Julius Frontinus to the powerful position of Curator Aquarum, the commissioner of Rome's water. Frontinus was a seasoned military commander and a practical man of the world, and he approached his new post with the rigor of a general inspecting his legions. He was horrified by what he found. The system was plagued by corruption and inefficiency. Water, that precious public resource, was being quietly stolen on a massive scale. Unscrupulous landowners had secretly tapped into the main channels, splicing illegal lead pipes into the aqueducts to divert entire streams to their private villas and farmland. This was not a few buckets of water. It was a systematic theft that left public fountains dry and bathhouses struggling to function. Frontinus saw this not just as a technical problem, but as a crime against the Roman people. He embarked on a comprehensive audit of the entire network, measuring flow rates, mapping every pipe, and rooting out these illicit connections with uncompromising authority. He wanted to know exactly how much water entered the city and precisely where every drop of it went. This meticulous investigation was the foundation for his great work, a book he titled De Aqueductu Urbis Romae, on the aqueducts of the city of Rome. It was not a poetic tribute, but a clear-eyed administrative and technical manual. In its pages, Frontinus recorded everything. He listed the names, lengths, and heights of all 11 aqueducts. He detailed their specific water quality, noting which were best for drinking and which were suited for irrigation or filling ornamental lakes. He explained the legal framework that governed the water's use, from the emperor's right to a supply down to the specific allowances for public and private use. Most importantly, he gave us the numbers. He calculated the flow rates using the Roman unit of aquinaria, providing a precise mathematical snapshot of the system's capacity. His work gives us something rare, a primary source window not just into how the aqueducts were built, but how they were actually managed day to day. Through Frontinus, we hear the voice of the man who stood at the Castellum Aquae, not as a poet or a philosopher, but as a manager fighting to protect the lifeblood of 1 million people from the quiet greed that threatened to divert it. Frontinus discovered a secret war being waged in the dark. The precious water flowing toward Rome was under constant siege, not by foreign armies, but by its own citizens. Wealthy landowners, powerful industrialists, and even unscrupulous publicans would bribe the very aquarii tasked with maintaining the channels. For a few coins, a maintenance worker might look the other way while a hidden lead pipe, a fistula, was secretly punched into the side of the aqueduct specus. This illegal tap would then divert a steady, private stream of public water, sometimes for miles, to supply a luxurious private bath, to irrigate a vast private vineyard, or to power a lucrative milling operation that should have been paying for its supply. This was not a victimless crime. Every illegal diversion meant a public fountain in a crowded neighborhood ran a little slower, a grand therme had to limit its hours, and the city's poorest citizens felt the pinch of a stolen resource. The conflict over water revealed a deep social divide, pitting private greed against the public good in a struggle as old as civilization itself. The Roman state fought back with a comprehensive legal code. The penalties for getting caught were severe. A person convicted of illegally tapping an aqueduct faced a massive fine, 100,000 sesterces. To put that number in perspective, that sum could have purchased a comfortable estate in the countryside or represented decades of salary for a common laborer. But the law went beyond mere fines. It held the aquarii to a fierce standard of accountability. If a worker was found to have knowingly permitted a theft, his punishment was not a fine, but a brutal flogging, a public and painful reminder of his duty. The laws even extended to the land the aqueducts crossed. A landowner was forbidden from planting trees too close to the underground channel, as their roots could eventually crack the waterproof lining and undermine the entire structure. This was not just about punishing theft, it was about protecting the integrity of the system itself from any form of encroachment. The grand aqueducts, therefore, were more than stone and water. They were a stage for a continuous battle, a conflict between the disciplined order of Roman engineering and the chaotic, persistent force of human ambition. While Frontinus battled water thieves in Rome, the same stone rivers were being carved into landscapes from the deserts of Africa to the forests of Britain. The aqueduct was more than an engineering tool, it was a powerful symbol of Roman identity, a deliberate export of civilization itself. Wherever the legions marched and the empire took root, the clear, reliable flow of water followed, transforming conquered territories into reflections of the capital. In the sun-baked heart of Spain, the city of Segovia received a statement of imperial power that was both brutal and beautiful. Its aqueduct is a titan of granite, a two-tiered arcade of 166 immense, unmortared arches that stride straight through the modern city center, carrying water nearly 100 feet above the bustling streets. The sheer audacity of its construction, with massive blocks cut so precisely they hold together by gravity and friction alone, makes it feel less like a ruined monument and more like a permanent, living part of the mountain from which it was born. Far to the northeast, in the province of Gaul, a different kind of masterpiece served the city of Nemesis, modern-day Nimes. Here, the challenge was to cross the wide, deep gorge of the Garden River. The solution was the Pont du Gard, a bridge so sublime it seems to defy its own weight. This three-tiered arcade rises 160 feet high, with the water channel running along the very top. The massive stone blocks, some weighing over 6 tons, were cut with such precision that the entire structure was built without any mortar, locked together by the genius of its design and the skill of its craftsmen. It was not merely functional, it was a piece of breathtaking public art, a demonstration that Roman rule could bring both order and beauty. And on the coast of North Africa, the resurrected city of Carthage, once Rome's greatest rival, was quenched by one of the most extensive systems in the entire empire. A complex web of aqueducts fed by distant springs over 90 miles away converged on the city, with some channels carried on arcades so massive they were wide enough to drive a cart across. To supply this reclaimed metropolis was to announce final, absolute victory, not through destruction but through an overwhelming, life-giving abundance. Each of these projects from Spain to Africa served the same dual purpose: They supplied vital water to growing cities, yes, but they also served as constant, visible reminders of Roman power and Roman peace. They were the arteries of a unified body, pumping the same essential lifeblood to every limb of a vast, diverse, and astonishingly connected world. Perhaps the most revolutionary use of aqueduct water had nothing to do with human thirst at all. The same steady flow that filled public fountains was also harnessed as a raw, physical force, a relentless power source that could drive machinery on an industrial scale. The Romans began to channel aqueduct water not just into cities, but directly into the heart of their factories. The most spectacular example of this industrial might lies in the sun-bleached hills of southern France, near the city of Arles. Here, a branch of a major aqueduct did not head for a public bathhouse. Instead, it cascaded down a steep hillside in a breathtaking feat of engineering known as the Barbagal Mill Complex. This was not a single water wheel, but a colossal, multi-level power plant carved into the rocky slope. The aqueduct channel split into two parallel races at the top of the hill. Each of these channels then fed a cascading series of 8 individual water wheels, 16 in total, arranged in 2 parallel rows down the hillside. Imagine the sight and sound of this place in its prime. The water would pour from the aqueduct onto the topmost wheel, spinning it with tremendous force. The spent water from that first wheel would then be channeled directly onto a second wheel just below it, and then a third and a fourth, all the way down the hillside. Each wheel transferred its power through a system of wooden gears to turn massive millstones that ground grain into fine flour. This complex was not just a mill, it was a veritable bakery for an entire region. Historians estimate it could have produced enough flour every single day to feed a population of over 12,000 people. Barbagal stands as a stunning declaration of Roman industrial ambition, a place where the gentle flow of an aqueduct was transformed into a thunderous, coordinated roar of mechanical power, arguably the earliest known industrial complex in the world. This was the ultimate expression of their hydraulic genius, proving that the water they so carefully guided could do far more than just quench a thirst. It could feed an empire. That thunderous power of the aqueduct, however, flows into a quieter, more insidious mystery. The Romans channeled their pristine water through miles of lead pipes. For centuries, a tantalizing theory has persisted that this very act of genius sowed the seeds of the empire's decay, that a slow, invisible poison dripped from the taps of the wealthy and the public fountains alike, leading to a widespread decline known as lead poisoning. The logic seems inescapable. We know now that lead is a potent neurotoxin, causing everything from gout and abdominal pain to severe mental instability and reduced fertility. The image is a powerful one, a great civilization unknowingly engineering its own downfall, one sip at a time. Yet the full story, as revealed by modern science, is far more complex and ultimately acquits the aqueducts of this particular crime. The key lies not in the lead itself, but in the water that flowed through it. The aqueduct water was not soft and acidic, the kind that readily leaches lead from pipes. It was what we call hard water, rich in dissolved minerals, especially calcium carbonate. As this mineral-rich water passed through the lead pipes, a remarkable thing happened. It did not corrode the metal. Instead, it almost immediately began to deposit a hard, crusty, protective layer on the inside of the pipe. This layer was sinter, the same calcium carbonate deposit the aquarii had to constantly chip away from the main channels. Inside the lead pipes, this sinter was not a problem, it was the solution. It formed a continuous, glassy shield, a perfect barrier between the toxic lead and the drinking water. Within a matter of weeks, the pipe's interior would have been completely coated, effectively insulating the water from its conduit. Scientific analysis of ancient Roman pipe fragments consistently shows this thick, layered crust, a fossilized record of the water's chemistry. The water that finally emerged from a Roman tap had likely not touched raw lead for years. This does not mean Romans had no lead exposure at all. They used lead extensively in their cooking pots, their wine-making equipment, and even as a sweetening agent in some wines and sauces. But the vast, life-giving network of the aqueducts, the very system accused for so long, was likely the safest part of their hydraulic world. The true poison was not in the public water supply, but in the private indulgences, a subtle distinction that solves a grand historical whodunit and shifts the blame from a marvel of engineering to the more intimate choices of daily life. The silent endurance of these stone rivers poses a profound question for our own time. Why do these 2,000-year-old structures still stand, while so much of what we build today shows its age within decades? The answer is a powerful combination of material, design, and sheer stubbornness. We have already uncovered the secret of their concrete, that living, self-healing stone born from volcanic ash. But the Romans did not rely on a single miracle material. Their structural genius extended to the very shapes they carved from the earth. The iconic arch is more than a beautiful curve, it is a masterpiece of physics. An arch works by converting the downward force of gravity into an outward thrust, which is then firmly caught and supported by the massive piers on either side. This brilliant distribution of weight meant that the structure could settle and shift over centuries without collapsing. They built not for rigidity, but for resilience, understanding that a structure that could breathe with the land would outlast one that fought against it. And they chose their stones with the same care a jeweler selects a gem. For their most critical arcades, they turned to travertine, a form of limestone deposited by mineral springs. This stone is incredibly dense and strong, resistant to weathering and capable of bearing immense loads. It was not a casual choice, it was a calculated investment in permanence. Yet perhaps the most overlooked factor in their longevity is simply the passage of time itself. Many of these aqueducts were not abandoned ruins for 2 millennia. They were actively maintained, repaired, and used for centuries after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Later civilizations, from the Byzantines to medieval monks, recognized the irreplaceable value of this ready-made infrastructure. They cleared the blocked channels, patched the cracked concrete, and kept the water flowing. This continuous care prevented the small, manageable problems that, left untended, lead to total structural failure. Compare this to a modern overpass or bridge, often designed with a specific, finite lifespan. We build with cost and speed in mind, using materials that are efficient but often susceptible to corrosion and fatigue. Our concrete can spoil, our steel reinforcements can rust from the inside out, a hidden decay the Romans never had to face. Their aqueducts stand as a silent rebuke to our own planned obsolescence, a testament to an engineering philosophy that asked not how quickly or cheaply something could be built, but how it could be made to last for the ages. What does it say about a civilization when its most enduring monuments are not its temples or palaces, but its public utilities? The stone rivers fell silent. With the slow collapse of Roman authority, the disciplined armies of Aquarii vanished, and the meticulous maintenance that had sustained the aqueducts for centuries simply ceased. The great system did not die in a single dramatic catastrophe, but from 1,000 small neglects. Sinter crusts thickened, unchecked, until they choked the channels completely. Settling basins filled with mud that no one ever dredged. Then came the invasions, and the aqueducts became strategic targets. Siege armies, recognizing the water supply as the city's true lifeline, would deliberately breach the arcades, severing the stone veins to force a surrender. In the centuries that followed, local populations, having lost the knowledge of how to repair the monumental structures, often quarried the beautifully cut stones for their own homes and walls. The graceful arcades were dismantled, block by block, becoming the foundations for medieval hovels and fortified towers. This was more than the end of an engineering marvel, it was the beginning of a profound retreat. The great cities of Europe, which had thrived on a constant, clean flow, shrank back toward their rivers, relying on polluted local sources. The public bathhouse, a cornerstone of Roman life, vanished for 1,000 years, a victim of both lost infrastructure and shifting social mores. The aqueduct's silence ushered in a genuine dark age for urban water supply, where the very concept of a city sustained by distant, pure mountain springs became a forgotten dream. Yet the ruins refused to be completely ignored. A millennium later, during the flowering of the Renaissance, artists and scholars began to wander through the crumbling arcades with a new sense of wonder. They saw them not as pagan relics, but as testaments to a lost golden age of human achievement. Men like Leonardo da Vinci studied the siphons and channels, sketching their principles with intense curiosity. Architects like Andrea Palladio measured the perfect proportions of the arches, seeking to unlock the secrets of their harmony and strength. The rediscovery of texts like Frontinus's manual provided a blueprint, a voice from the past explaining the very systems they walked among. This renewed fascination was not merely academic, it was the spark of a hydraulic reawakening. The principles embedded in those silent stones would directly inspire the magnificent fountains of Rome's Baroque renewal and eventually the great municipal waterworks of the modern world. The Dark Age was over, not because the water began to flow again, but because people had finally learned how to read the writing on the walls. The principles that guided the Roman aqueducts did not vanish with their empire, they simply went underground, waiting to be rediscovered. Our modern cities are sustained by a hidden network of water mains and distribution pipes that operate on the exact same foundational rule, the relentless pull of gravity. We may use pressurized systems for tall buildings, but the core journey of water from a distant reservoir to the edge of your city is a direct echo of the Roman method. Massive conduits are still laid along a carefully calculated downward slope, allowing water to flow for dozens of miles without a single pump, conserving immense amounts of energy. The main difference is one of material, not concept. We have traded stone speckers for steel and plastic pipes, but the water inside them is still walking that same ancient, gentle staircase. The Roman genius for choosing the path of least resistance has become the silent, efficient standard for municipal water systems across the globe. Their most profound legacy, however, may be locked within the very stone they poured. For decades, scientists have been puzzling over the remarkable durability of Roman concrete, especially in harsh marine environments. Modern Portland cement, for all its strengths, often cracks and degrades within decades when exposed to seawater. Roman concrete, by contrast, seems to grow stronger. The key, as researchers have confirmed, is that special ingredient, the volcanic pozzolana ash. The chemical reaction it creates does not simply stop, it enters a long, slow process of recrystallization. When tiny cracks form, mineral-rich water seeps in, and new, interlocking crystals grow, effectively healing the fracture from the inside out. This self-healing property is the holy grail of modern materials science. Today, engineers are actively developing new types of concrete that incorporate similar principles, embedding capsules of healing agents or using special bacteria that precipitate limestone to fill cracks. We are, in a very real sense, trying to reverse engineer a 2,000-year-old recipe to solve our own modern problems of infrastructure decay. The silent, enduring aqueducts are not just relics, they are active laboratories offering solutions to the pressing challenge of building a world that lasts. What other ancient secrets are still waiting, hidden in plain sight, for us to truly understand? The grand arcades we picture were not raised by the hands of slaves alone. This persistent image of endless chains of forced labor is a dramatic myth. The reality was far more complex and speaks to the immense value Rome placed on this infrastructure. While slaves certainly performed some of the brute work, the critical engineering, the precise stone cutting, and the delicate plumbing were the domain of highly skilled, well-paid craftsmen. These were the liberty, freedmen, and Roman citizens who formed the backbone of specialized construction guilds. Their expertise in surveying, masonry, and hydraulics was far too valuable to leave to unskilled labor. An aqueduct was a massive public works project, a multi-generational investment that demanded the best minds and hands available, and Rome was willing to pay for that quality. The water itself behaved nothing like a modern fire hose. We imagine a continuous, thundering torrent rushing through the channel, but the flow was a carefully managed resource. For much of its journey, the water moved with a quiet, steady purpose. More importantly, the supply was not constant. Many aqueducts operated on a scheduled system, with flow being intentionally reduced or even shut off at night to allow for maintenance and to let the channels replenish. This was not a wild river, but a tamed one, its power metered out with bureaucratic precision. And those iconic arches, so burned into our collective memory, were always the exception, not the rule. They were the dramatic punctuation in a very long, very quiet sentence written mostly underground. For every soaring arcade that captured the public's imagination, there were 10 miles of silent, dark, covered trench and tunnel, the true workhorse of the system. The popular image of Rome connected by an endless procession of stone bridges is a beautiful fiction. The genuine marvel was the empire's ability to think in terms of the whole system, a sprawling, hidden network that prioritized function over spectacle, ensuring that the lifeblood of the city flowed unseen and uninterrupted. Uncovering how these stone rivers actually functioned requires the tools of a scientific detective. The first clue often lies not in the stone itself, but in the faint imprint the aqueduct left upon the land. Archaeologists start by walking the suspected route, searching for the subtle signs modern development has missed. A long, linear depression in a farmer's field might trace the path of a collapsed subterranean channel. A row of oddly placed, ancient stone blocks could be the last remnants of a buried conduit's access point. In dense forests, they look for unnatural straight lines in the vegetation or a consistent change in plant life, hinting at the rich, moist soil still hidden below. Once a potential path is identified, technology takes over. Ground-penetrating radar sends pulses of energy into the earth, painting a ghostly image of what lies beneath without ever turning a shovel. It can reveal the distinct rectangular shape of a buried specus or the foundational piers of a long-vanished arcade, guiding excavators straight to the most promising secrets. This slow, methodical work of tracing the aqueduct's ghost across the countryside is the essential first step in bringing the entire system back to life. But to understand the water that flowed there, scientists turn to the aqueduct's own calcified memories. Inside the channels, they find thick crusts of sinter, that stony deposit the Roman maintenance crews constantly battled. This material is a time capsule. By analyzing its chemical composition, researchers can determine the original water's mineral content and even its temperature. The thickness of the sinter layers acts like the rings of a tree, recording the passage of time and the flow rate. A thick, rapidly deposited layer might indicate a period of high, turbulent flow, while a thin, fine layer suggests centuries of a calm, steady stream. This silent stone record can even reveal periods of neglect, where a sudden change in the sinter tells the story of a breach in the channel or a temporary abandonment. The aqueducts, it turns out, kept their own meticulous diaries written in a language of mineral and stone. The final pieces of the puzzle come from the words the Romans left behind. The discovery of an inscription on a damaged arch can reveal the name of the emperor who commissioned it, the legion that built it, and the year it was completed, anchoring the entire structure in a specific historical moment. But the most valuable text remains Frontinus's manual. His precise measurements and administrative complaints provide a baseline against which all physical evidence can be measured. When an archaeologist uncovers an illegal pipe tap, they are seeing the very crime Frontinus railed against. When they trace the route of the Aqua Marcia, they are walking the path he meticulously described. His words transform scattered stones into a living, managed system, giving voice to the silent struggle between order and chaos that defined this monumental achievement. Each of these detective methods, from the technological to the textual, weaves together to form a single, continuous story, proving that the true scale of Roman genius is only now coming fully into view. We can now give these silent stones a voice. Imagine harnessing the power of modern three-dimensional modeling and virtual reality to digitally rebuild an entire aqueduct system, from its mountain spring to the bustling city taps. This is not just an animation, it is a digital resurrection. You could stand inside the specus itself, watching a clear, virtual stream flow past your feet, its surface dappled with light filtering through the stone slabs above. You could witness the Castellum Aquae in full operation, seeing the water pour into its final settling basin before being divided into those lead pipes, a perfect demonstration of Roman civic order made visible. The true scale of the system would finally become apparent as you soar above the landscape, flying alongside the Pont du Gard not as a broken monument, but as a complete, functioning bridge, its water channel full and purposeful. The most profound revelations would come from seeing the entire network at once. You could trace the 11 aqueducts of Rome converging on the city like the strands of a great web, understanding for the first time how their combined flow created a hydraulic metropolis. You could toggle the view to see the hidden world beneath the earth, the countless miles of tunnel that made the few miles of arcade possible. This virtual journey would transform our understanding from an academic concept into a sensory experience. What hidden engineering details, invisible in the ruins today, would suddenly become clear when the water is flowing and every component is working in harmony? Such a reconstruction would be more than a tool for historians. It would be a time machine, allowing us to walk through the greatest achievement of Roman engineering not as a ghost, but as a living, breathing system. These stone rivers were far more than a line of beautiful arches. They were the physical expression of a complete philosophy. The true revelation is the system itself, a complex, sprawling network that was mostly hidden from view, a subterranean labyrinth powered by nothing more than the silent, relentless pull of gravity. Its path was not guessed, but precisely mapped by surveyors whose simple tools traced a line of perfect descent across dozens of miles. This was not a static monument, but a living utility, maintained by an army of workers who fought a constant battle against mineral deposits and sediment to keep the water clear. And that water did so much more than quench a thirst. It defined a civilization, flowing into the social hearts of the bathhouses, powering the industrial mills that fed entire cities, and gracing the public fountains that symbolized a shared civic life. The aqueducts were Roman order made manifest, a perfect blend of material science, administrative rigor, and profound respect for the natural world. They stand today not as ruins but as teachers. Their enduring stone asks us what we are building now that will still speak of our own ingenuity 2,000 years from today. We would love to hear what surprised you most about these ancient marvels, or if you have ever walked in the shadow of a local Roman aqueduct yourself. Share your stories and discoveries in the comments below.